You know how people tend to act when they start feeling spiritually superior. Whether they're part of a religious group, an occult circle, or a spiritual community, they often believe they hold the exclusive right teachings. They start to think of themselves as part of the select few who are enlightened or chosen, while those outside their circle are seen as misguided or lost. They say, "We have the real understanding," and often look down on others who don't share their views. However, then someone else comes along and claims to be even more open-minded and accepting, saying, "We embrace all religions, all paths, and all beliefs as leading to the same truth." But ironically, what they're really doing is playing another game of superiority. They are essentially saying, "We are more tolerant than you." This is just another form of spiritual arrogance, and it shows how deeply the ego can trap a person, even when they believe they are beyond such traps. Buddha recognized this issue in his own journey. He realized that all his intense yoga practices, meditations, and ascetic disciplines were, at their core, just different ways of trying to escape the trap of suffering for his own benefit. They were all aimed at finding personal peace, enlightenment, and escape from suffering. But Buddha understood that the desire to escape suffering was, in itself, part of the problem. The very motivation to escape suffering was rooted in the same ego-driven desire that caused suffering in the first place. He realized that there was no real external trap to escape from, except for the one he had built within himself. The trap and the trapped were one and the same. Once this realization dawned on him, he understood that there was no trap to escape from at all. I'll explain this profound realization more clearly as we proceed. Because of this awakening, Buddha developed what he called the Dharma. In Sanskrit, Dharma means the method or the path. You may notice when reading about Buddhism that there's often a mix of Sanskrit and Pali words. Pali is the language of the earliest Buddhist scriptures, and it's a close relative of Sanskrit. For example, in Sanskrit, Buddha's teachings are referred to as the Dharma, whereas in Pali, it's written as Dhamma. Similarly, the word karma in Sanskrit becomes kama in Pali. Despite the language differences, the meaning remains consistent. The Dharma that Buddha taught wasn't a set doctrine, and this is important to understand. Unlike in Christianity, Islam, or Judaism, where you can pinpoint a specific set of teachings or dogmas, Buddhism is more of a dialectical process. It's a method of dialogue, not a strict, unchangeable belief system. What many people think of as the teachings of Buddhism are often just the starting points of this larger conversation. The actual teachings evolve through dialogue and practice, not through rigid doctrine. When Buddha was a young man, his main concern was the problem of human suffering. To simplify his message, he presented his teachings in ways that were easy to remember. For instance, he often used lists and numbers to make his points memorable, and one of the most well-known of these is the Four Noble Truths. The first noble truth is dukkha. This word can be translated as suffering, dissatisfaction, or pain. It refers to the universal human experience of suffering, which includes everything from physical pain to emotional distress to the existential unease we all feel at times. It's the opposite of sukha, which means pleasure or ease. The Buddha's starting point was this: life involves suffering. The question then becomes, if suffering is an inevitable part of life, how do we deal with it? How do we escape this suffering? The second noble truth addresses the cause of suffering, which Buddha identified as trishna, a Sanskrit word meaning thirst or craving. It's often translated as desire, but a better translation might be attachment or clinging. It's not just about wanting things, it's about the unhealthy way we cling to desires, to outcomes, and even to our sense of self. Modern psychology might describe this as being stuck or blocked. When a person is frozen in indecision or overwhelmed by hesitation, they are clinging to something, whether it's a fear of failure, a desire for approval, or an attachment to a particular identity. Buddha taught that an enlightened person is never stuck. Just like water, they flow freely and adapt to whatever comes their way. Even if you dam a river, the water will keep rising until it flows over. Similarly, a person free from attachment flows with life, unimpeded by obstacles. Buddha explained that suffering arises because we cling to things, failing to recognize the impermanence of life. The key, then, is to learn how to let go of this clinging. But this leads to a paradox. When a person tries to let go of desires, they often find themselves desiring not to desire. They become attached to the idea of non-attachment, which is just another form of clinging. When the student brings this problem to the Buddha points out the paradox gently. Of course, you are desiring not to desire, and that too is a form of attachment. This is where the concept of the middle way comes in. Buddhism is called the middle way because it avoids extremes, not only the extremes of self-indulgence and extreme asceticism, but also the extremes of over-effort and under-effort in spiritual practice. Buddha advised his followers not to force themselves to give up all desire immediately, but to let go gradually and mindfully, without becoming attached to the idea of perfection. The third noble truth is the cessation of suffering, known as nirvana. Nirvana is the ultimate goal of Buddhism, the state of liberation from suffering and attachment. The word nirvana literally means blowing out or extinguishing, but it's important to clarify what's being extinguished. Some people mistakenly think it means the extinction of the self or desire, but a better interpretation is the natural release of attachment. Imagine holding your breath. At first it feels fine, but soon it becomes uncomfortable. The more you try to hold it, the more unbearable it becomes. Eventually, you must let go and exhale. Similarly, clinging to life desires and outcomes creates suffering. Letting go of these attachments, like letting go of your breath, brings relief and freedom. Nirvana is not about disappearing into nothingness or an empty void. Instead, it's about living in a state of profound letting go. It's about fully engaging with the present moment, without clinging to outcomes or being consumed by desires. It's a state of flow, where you move through life effortlessly, responding to challenges without getting trapped by them. The fourth noble truth is the path that leads to the cessation of suffering, known as the Eightfold Path. This path is divided into three main areas: wisdom, ethical conduct, and mental discipline. It provides a comprehensive guide for living a life that leads to the realization of nirvana. Dr. Suzuki, a renowned Buddhist scholar, once gave a humorous yet insightful explanation of this path. During a lecture, he began to describe the Eightfold Path, but when he reached the second step, he paused and said, "I forget the second step. You can look it up in the book." His point was that while the specifics of the path are important, what matters most is the overall understanding and application of the principles in daily life. Each step of the Eightfold Path starts with the word samyak, often translated as right. However, samyak has a broader meaning, including complete or balanced. It's about having a holistic, balanced approach to life. For example, samyak drishti, often translated as right view, doesn't just mean holding the correct beliefs. It means having a balanced, comprehensive view of life. It's about seeing things as they are, without distortion or attachment. The Eightfold Path covers all aspects of life, from how we view the world, samyak drishti, to how we speak, act, and earn a living. It also includes guidance on mindfulness and meditation, helping us cultivate a balanced, mindful approach to every aspect of our lives. By following this path, we learn to live in the present, free from the attachments that cause suffering. In conclusion, the Buddha's teachings are not about escaping the world or seeking refuge from life's difficulties. Instead, they offer a way to transform our relationship with the world. By letting go of attachment, embracing the present moment, and living in balance, we can find freedom from suffering. The key isn't in trying to control everything or force specific outcomes, but in learning to flow with life just like a river. The more we let go and trust the process, the more peace we find. Through these teachings, we learn that suffering is not something to be feared or avoided at all costs, but rather something to understand, confront, and release. The more we engage with life mindfully and with compassion, the more we experience the profound freedom that Buddha discovered under the Bodhi tree.